Hi, everyone. Welcome. Can you all hear me okay? You can use the chat box. There's a little icon that says chat at the bottom. Let me know if you can hear me and see me. Awesome. At least Kelly can. That's good. Oh, good. Okay, this is so exciting. And you guys can see me okay? This is, you guys are my guinea pig. This is my first webinar, not my first teaching webinar, teaching online, but first time doing this. So, all right, great. Welcome. I'm also so glad that you could join me this evening. Thank you for spending your time with all of us. And I hope that you get some gold pieces, nuggets to help you in your family history journey and in your research, and that together we can find new ways to become more organized in our family history. I all know that's a big struggle for all of us, even outside of family history, right? To stay organized. But when we throw in this new element of historical research, it can be easy to get off track or to feel overburdened in a way. And I know that sometimes can stop people from doing their family history. And I don't want that to happen to you. So hopefully today we're able to make you feel in control with your family history. A little bit of logistics on how to handle this Zoom room, this webinar program. Seems like you're doing good handling the chat. So there's a little button at the bottom that says chat. And if you click on that, that will open your chat box, or you can close it. And I really want to make this relaxed. We have a intimate group here, and so feel free to use the chat box as much as you'd like. And my husband will be here shortly to monitor the chat box. And so use it to ask any questions that you have. There is a Q&A button at the bottom, and you can ask questions there. But if you also just want to throw them in the chat box, that's totally fine just to do it the chat box. And so if you have a question as we go, just throw it in there, and then my husband will make sure that I'm able to answer it. And we'll keep this as interactive as possible as we can through the internet. Because otherwise, if we were in the same room, we could just talk back and forth. So we'll try to recreate that as much as possible. And let's see, other buttons. That's pretty much the only thing you need, as long as you can see and hear me. So if you have any technical issues, if you get kicked out and can't get back in or anything, you can email me. My husband will also be monitoring my email. So if you have any issues, you can email me at hannahz.allan@gmail.com, and he'll help you out as much as you can. All right, so thumbs up. We'll get started here. Let's just jump right in. You will need a piece of paper, so hopefully you already have that. I will be sending out my notes after the workshop with lots of detail, so you don't need to feel like you need to frantically write down everything, but you also need some paper just to, because we're going to do some brainstorming a little bit. So be sure to have that handy, as well as maybe your own family history. Maybe you have it in your head, but I'm going to have you do some exercises to think about your own family history. So if you have your family history in the cloud on, Ancestry.com or Family Search, or, I have seen somebody put their family history on Christmas wrapping paper. They came into my work at the Oregon Historical Society and rolled out this long sheet of wrapping paper. He said it was the only big piece of paper he could find with his family history. So if that's where it's kept, pull it out and have it handy as we start to dive in to do this, so you can do these exercises that we have going on. All right, the last thing I want to do before we get started is I want to get a feel for how you feel about your family history right now. And so think about your family history research and think of one word to describe it. Would it be chaos? Would it be controlled? Would it be organized? Would it be, exciting? Whatever it is, how do you feel about your family history right now? And throw that word into the chat box, okay? How do you feel about your family history research right now? Confusing. Lori says, confused. Don't we all? Sparse. Oh, that's a good word. Frustrated. Oh, no. My husband's telling me something. What? Oh, no. Let's get the light into that. Frustrated. Okay. So yeah, totally. I totally relate to all of these feelings when you're doing family history. And so hopefully, and it should, this workshop will help you get organized to help to remove that confusion. If you got my email that I sent out about my ancestor who moved every 9 years, and I got really frustrated and confused. And it took becoming organized and creating a plan to help me get out of that and to not be angry at my ancestor. So today's workshop will help you with that for sure. Awesome. All right, and just to warn you, we have a cat here in the house. I'm doing this at my parents' house, and she likes to come across the screen. So if that's what happens. All right, so the first, when we, let me get my PowerPoint going. Here we go. So I have these cute pictures to describe how we may feel about family history. These are just kind of fun. And maybe we feel like this sometimes. Anyways, I have this great quote. And when we're doing family history and when we're creating a plan, we focus our plan on goals. But Stephen Covey said, stop setting goals. He said, goals are pure fantasy unless you have a specific plan to achieve them. And I think this is really applicable to this webinar because in family history, we often have goals. We think, okay, I'm trying to find my ancestor's death date, or I'm trying to find his naturalization record, or I'm just trying to figure out where they came from. We have these arbitrary goals in our head, but they're actually pretty useless because we don't have a plan to achieve them. And so that's why we need to set goals with a plan. And today's workshop will be all about that. We're going to talk about how to set really specific goals that are helpful to you, and then the plan to achieve them, to create those goals. One kind of example I have about this is I am the genealogist for the Oregon Historical Society in downtown Portland. And we often get people who come into the research library. So I work as a reference librarian there. And they walk into the library and they come to the reference desk and they say, I'm interested in learning about the Oregon Trail. And I'll just stare at them like, well, you came to the right place. We are the Oregon Historical Society. But then we have to help them narrow it down because we are the Oregon Historical Society. We have a lot of information about the Oregon Trail, as you can possibly imagine. So I'll start to help them become more specific. And I'll say, what do you want to know about the Oregon Trail? Do you want to know about the women or the men? Where on the Oregon Trail? Are we talking about in Oregon or Nebraska? Do you want to know about the weather during the Oregon Trail, or maybe some of the hardships with the Indians, or the plains? What was it? Or the children, or the animals, the wagons themselves? What do you want to know about the Oregon Trail? And so we tried to help them start narrowing it down. But then once we get to that point where they determine what it is they want to know about the Oregon Trail, we then say, well, what kinds of records do you want to look at? Do you want to look at journals and diaries from the Oregon Trail? Or do you want to look at some photographs or drawings? Do you want to look at books? Do you want to look at oral histories? What is it that resources that you want to spend your time with today? That allows us then to create a plan to help them answer their objective. The same thing is with our family history. We often go onto Ancestry.com or go onto Family Search and we say, I want to find out about John Smith. And so we just get onto the search engine and we type in John Smith and we hope something relevant to what we know pops up. And that can work a little bit because we sometimes catch the low-hanging fruit, I call it, the few things that do pop up and that do match. But it only takes us to a certain point. And then we're ready to go really trying to find our answers and we're struggling. And so we need to come up with more specific goals and then figure out what records or resources will help us answer that and then stay focused on our plan. And so that's kind of the backstory, a little example that I have when we're doing family history is become a more proactive researcher. Instead of throwing darts at our family tree, we think very systematically. And our plan all surrounds what's called objectives. Objectives, as we know, are basically goals. But if you think about the root of the word, object or some objective, something is an objective view versus a subjective view of a viewpoint. An objective view means we don't take in all these opinions or these other factors that are going on. We're very focused. It's very linear, and in a way, that's how we become when we do our family history, or we should become, is objective. We don't get sidetracked, and we keep to the plan. So here's a little imagery on, here's our objective at this point, and over here is what we know. And there's actually, an object or an objective lens we've heard. You've heard of that. This is the same type of thing. The light goes through it and it creates a point that we can then focus on. So this lens that we see things through is our plan to help us meet objective. And then on the other side, after we meet our objective, we gain new information about what to know, and we repeat the process over and over and over and over and over again. So I kind of like this, and then another little imagery that's going on. All right, so we're going to keep calm, and we're going to stay focused today, right? And all the times that we do our family history. So basically, when we start out, we always bounce off of what we know, just like in that lens view that we had there. A lot of time when I'm working with clients or consulting historians, genealogists, is we get lost in all of these bits and pieces of information. And I feel this way too when I'm gathering all of these documents or other things that are going on, and I'm really excited and I start following bunny trails, and then I go, oh wait, I've lost where I'm at, I'm confused, I'm frustrated. And so we always have to return to what we know. This was a really great point that was brought up to me when I was learning how to become a genealogist at Brigham Young University. Was always return to what you know. And what I mean by that is, what is the most concrete information you know? And how can I bounce off that information to find out more? And we'll go through some examples today to describe what I mean. So here are the 4 steps to our lesson today, to your plan. Step 1 is determining your objectives or your goals. Step 2 is to create your plan. And there's 2 parts underneath that we'll get to. Step 3 is the actual research. And then step 4 is to record and update your plan or your objectives. Your objectives really don't need tweaking so much, maybe a little bit. It's really where your plan gets tweaked and changed and as you record, okay? Because we always have the same kind of goals until those goals are met. Now, let's talk about step number 1, determining your objectives. Most objectives or most goals will fall under 4 categories. And these are identify a person or a relationship, such as I'm looking for a father, or I'm looking for a mother, or I'm looking for a brother or a wife, trying to find out what's their name, all right? So that's one type of an objective. Another type of objective is finding an event. So maybe we're looking for birth information or death information, or such as their military, whatever it is, a certain event that happened in their life, we're trying to look for that. There's also another one, such as searching a record group. So sometimes we just want to search, the census, all the census records for a particular person. And so that's another objective, search all the census records. It's okay, there's the cat. The 4th one is what's called a preliminary survey, and I'll have these in the notes, I'll forward these. A preliminary survey is when you scope out a certain kind of record type to see what's available. So maybe, and we'll talk about this too. So that's where you see if, let's say you're looking for death records and you want to see if death records are even available in the area that you're researching. That's called a preliminary survey. Or you're just we talked about the low hanging fruit, where you just kind of throw in your ancestor's name into a search engine and sees what pops up. That's called a preliminary survey. And so again, the 4 categories, and these are just, it don't really affect anything, but it's just to be aware, most categories or goals, will fall under those 4 categories. The most important thing when you're creating your goals is to be as specific as possible. So back to my story with walking into a library and asking about the Oregon Trail, that's not specific enough. You need it to be as specific as you can to know exactly where and when you're going to look according to the information that you already know. So a lot of people sometimes say, well, I don't know anything, I'm kind of stuck. Well, you actually know more than you realize. When you are analyzing your tree, so you want to analyze your person or your family when you're creating goals. Pull them up on the Family Search or on Ancestry.com. Write it down. I often, when I'm working with clients, I will just take it, even though I have a tree online or on Roots Magic or whatever it is, I will often take a piece of paper and I will write birth. I'll write the person's name that I'm focusing on. And then I'll write birth and marriage and death, whatever information I know, and then maybe their spouses and their children. I kind of just hash it out, because one reason is I like having a piece of paper right next to me, or you could have if you have double monitors, this works out, that I can then write things on and cross things out as I'm changing, and I can write some goals onto it. And so I just like to write down what information I already know to bounce off of. All right. And from there, I'm going to look for missing pieces. So if you're trying to even determine what goals you should even have, look at your tree. And if you're brand new to family history, look at the people that you're interested in or the person you're interested in, and look for missing information, such as their birth date. Do they not have a birth date? Or maybe it's just incomplete. Maybe it's just a year, or maybe it's just a state and you want to know the exact city and the exact day and month. Or maybe, again, you're looking for their spouse's information and who they were. So again, those objectives, what pieces of information are missing? And you can just write down all of these holes that you see. You can just, jot them down in no particular order, just some of these goals that you want to meet. Let's see. So for example, here on my screen, I have one of my ancestors, George Demosthenes Messagey. And you can see there that he was born on the 24th of January, 1837 in Greece. And then he was married to a woman named Catherine in 1857. She was born, and she died in 1947 in Washington State. They had one child that we know of, or in this example, she was born in 1878 in Oregon. So from here, I'm going to ask you, I would if I were in a class, just throw them in the chat box. What are some goals, or what are some missing pieces of information that we could look for? So just throw them in the chat box. What are some missing information in this particular example? I take a drink of water. All right, birth city, good. So we know he's born in Greece, but we don't know where. I would love to know where exactly in Greece. Greece is a big country. Good, Nan. So we don't have anything for his marriage or death. We don't have anything right there. Exactly. We don't have anything on his death going on. He's still alive. That's right. We don't have anything on his death. Good, Lori. We don't have anything about his parents or her parents. Good. So those are all goals, you could say. I'm looking for George Demosthenes' marriage date, or looking for his parents. So I would just jot those down. And this is where then we want to become more specific. Saying looking for George Demosthenes Messagey's death isn't good enough. We need to get more specific. Same thing with his marriage, looking for his marriage. And what we can do is look and draw conclusions on where and when to look. We want to look for times between events, dates and location of other events going on in the family, the most recent event, and most concrete events. So for example, the marriage. Where and when would you look for a marriage for Captain George Demosthenes Messagey? Does anybody have an idea? If this were you, again, your family, and you're looking for his marriage, what are some places you could look, meaning the city and the state, and what time frame? Any ideas? Okay, so we'd look in Washington. Good. Why is that? because Jane died in Washington. It looks like they lived in Washington. Cassandra died in Washington. Good. Okay. Why? And then we have 1878. Okay, good. The first child was born there in Oregon, was the birth of the daughter. All right, good. In 1878. Perfect. So the first daughter, if we're assuming this is her first daughter, but again, this is the most concrete information we have, is we know for sure that she was born in 1878 in Portland, Oregon. Cassandra was. So that's the most concrete information we have. So therefore, I'm going to assume that Captain George Messagey and Catherine were married sometime around 1878. Back then, it didn't take them very long to have children after they were born, unlike today. So they could have been married in early 1878. And I'm probably going to look around either, I can start with Oregon because that's where she was born, but I'm also going to keep Washington in mind. And there, we've narrowed it down. So the more specific goal is look for George Demosthenes Messagey and Catherine Fraser's marriage in Oregon or Washington. You could say Oregon, we could start there around 1878. So that's our more specific goal. Awesome. The other ones that we could do are George's birthplace. So we know he's born in 1837 in Greece, so we have that down. We also have his death date. This one's a little trickier, a little more ambiguous. He could have died. We're going to assume that he didn't die after Catherine, right? Because he would have been very old. So we're going to assume that he died, before her in 1947. And I would personally look in Washington because that's where Catherine died. So that's the other goal. So I'm going to actually write these down on a Word document today. Oh, there's my notes. There you go. For you, so we can see how this would look. And we have here, number 1, find George D. Messagey's marriage date and place. And you can write it out in a sentence. I sometimes just do this in parentheses. And we will talk about organizing all of this near the end. So you can't see that? Oh, okay, hang on. All right, there you go. The second one would be, we can just do this, find George D. Messagey's. If I had a whiteboard, I'd do this, so that's why we're doing it on a Word document. Date and place, and I'm gonna say around, oh, I did that, I'm repeating myself. Let's do George D. Messagey's exact birthplace, and we're going to say Greece, 24th of January, 1837. And so, like I said, just jot down any kind of goals that you have. Death, date, and place. I'm going to say Washington or Oregon, and I'm gonna say before Catherine died. So, and then the fourth one, let's say we want to find the record group category, George D. Messagey's in all the census records. So this is where you get to see how terrible of a speller I am. Okay. Those are the 4 goals that we focus on today. So I'm going to ask you to think about your own family history. What is a goal that you could pursue soon or that you are thinking about? And if you're comfortable sharing, throw that into the chat box. What's a goal that you have with your personal family history for a person or a family? And if it's not specific enough, I'll ask you. Okay, so Lori, why don't you even go and you want to share the name? So birth date and record. You're looking for the actual record and the birth date. Who and where are you looking and what time frame? Okay, 2 daughters. And is that General. So, okay, good. So Zephaniah Wood, what a fun name. Oh, 1775-ish. Okay, good. So we know he was born around 1775, Zephaniah Wood. And what location, Lori? See, I'm going to help you guys become really specific. Nan, if you feel comfortable sharing the names of the two daughters, or maybe the location that they lived and the time frame, something more, a little more specific. Gonna kind of make you work a little hard today. Okay, good. Massachusetts or New York. I've worked those early ancestors. It's hard because sometimes the records can be back and forth. If anybody else feels like sharing, throw them into the chat box and we'll keep moving. All right. So, find records related to my great-great-grandmother. All right. So, Betsy, that's awesome. I would encourage you to actually, when you're creating a plan, is to write down the actual type of records you're looking for. So again, so it doesn't become this general thing. What are some specifics related to deaths and dates? Eleonora and Karen. Oh, I love that. 18. What a wonderful names. They're kind of unique. That can be very helpful rather than a John Smith, right? When we're doing family history. Awesome. Okay, so in your own family history research, you can write this down on a piece of paper, and let's see. The next thing to do after you have these goals is prioritize them. Prioritize which ones you want to start with. And when you're prioritizing, you want to be careful not, again, to do a dart at your family tree. You base your priorities on the information that you already know and the unknown. So again, that working your way from the known to the unknown. So for example, George de Message's death date would be great to find first, but there's less information about that, whereas I have more information about, or more clues for their marriage. So I may start there first because I have more clues that would help me out. So that may be one reason to prioritize the marriage as a starting point versus the death date, if that makes sense. Another alternative to prioritizing your objectives is from the most accessible record first. So while I may have more information about their marriage or more clues about their marriage, I may find out as I start that there is an index for death dates in Washington. And I often know that usually death indexes or death records are more available than marriage, or vice, whatever it is. And so therefore the death objective may be first over the marriage because it's easier to fulfill that objective. And often, as you know, when doing family history, one record will give me clues for something else. So for example, if I were going to prioritize this personal list for me, I would actually make census records first because, right, census records, I know they're available. I'm going to just do a survey to try to find them in all the census records. I know I'll get a lot of clues from that may help my other objectives. So that's going to be my very first objective, is to find him in all the census records. Now that is a broad objective. I could make it more specific by saying I'm going to look for him in this year, this year, this year, this year, this year, and in these places. But since census records are online and search engines and everything like that make it a little more accessible, I'm just going to make it one big objective: search all the census records for George. Now, I probably would then focus maybe on his death, because again, I know off the top of my head from doing my research that there may be an index better, there may be a better index for death. There's things like find a grave. So that might be my next objective. And then my third would be their marriage, and fourth would be his birthplace, because I already have a lot of information there, more than the others, and it would just be nice to know more specifics about his birth. So I'm going to make that my last. So that's how I would prioritize. Does that make sense? The prioritizing of your goals. Just give me a yes in the chat box, or if you have any questions at this point, just put a question mark in the chat, and then that will give you some time to write the actual question out, so I can know to wait. So if you have a question, just put a question mark in the chat box. But good, okay, I'm making sense. I'm glad that I make sense. All right, so the prioritizing there. Now let's move on. We have these great objectives. Oh, Nan, you have a question. Please write out your question and we will wait. I'll make this one other point while you type in your question. And Judith, are you have chaos? Personal chaos, or are you having chaos with what I'm teaching? The last point I want to make while we're waiting for this question is, just type it out there, Nan, is keep track of your objectives, just like I'm doing here. And we will discuss some tools and some technology that will help you keep track of these objectives. But in order to stay focused, you have to write them out. You have to take time to write out your objectives. And the whole thing that I'm going to be teaching today takes discipline, because I know how easy it is when you're doing family history. You get excited and you start searching online and you start going all over and you're just, I'm just looking. But if you don't take the time to write your objectives and your plan out, you will eventually get lost and frustrated. You won't remember, even if you think you will, you won't remember your to-dos. So the first point, if you get anything from my class today, is to take notes by writing things out. So Nanny said, oh, you want to know how to access newspaper archives. Okay, we will talk about that, and we also talk about it in some other my upcoming webinars. So Ken, if you can make a note of that, I'm happy to answer that question at the end of accessing newspaper archives, okay? And Judith, you're looking for birth records when you came to Oregon. Okay, Judith, I can help you answer some of that as well because of my work with Oregon family history. So if you two can stick around at the end, I'll answer those two questions in more detail at the end. Okay, so you write these things out, you get specific on your goals. Let's talk about creating that plan to meet your objectives. And creating a plan is all about now what records are going to answer these goals that we have here on the Word document. And there's two parts to this step. The first part is determine what record or records will answer your question. And a lot of times these are very obvious. So there's some obvious ones. Of course, when we're trying to find all the census records, we have census. Now, for finding George D. Message's death date and place, what is a very obvious record to look for? Throw it in the chat box. What would be an obvious record to look for when you're looking for death date and place? Okay, Judith, I'll answer your question at the end too. All right, death certificate, good job. All right, so, and again, if you're new to family history and you're like, I don't even know that there's such things as death records, we'll talk about some resources to help you know what kind of records to look for. And that's why we always keep educating ourselves about what kinds of records are available to us. So good, death certificates is a very obvious record to look for to answer a death date. What's a not so obvious record for those who've been doing family history that would include his death date and place? Okay, good, Lori. So cemetery records. It's not a death certificate, but a cemetery or tombstone. And I'll just tell you this, just because it's in stone doesn't mean it's true. So beware. I had that with an ancestor. Okay, good, Nan. And obituaries. Obituaries, we can access those online. So these are more records to think about. Good, Kelly. A will or a probate. Good job, guys. All right, A+ for you. Awesome. And then maybe a not so obvious type of record that a lot of people don't think about has to do with this clue, or this um, tip, I should say. And the tip is complete whole families. And when I say that, of course, we're in the business of family history, so we want to find all of these relationships in our ancestors' life. But other people's or other ancestor family members' information can help us find another family member's information. For example, if my descendants, my son's son, was researching me and trying to find my parents' names, and he was searching and searching and searching, and he was really stuck, and he was having a hard time, and he couldn't find my parents' names on any of my records, but he did know that I had a brother named Grant. And if he researched Grant's death certificate says his parents' names. And those are the same parents as mine. So when you get stuck, this is kind of a tip with research that we'll talk about in my next webinar, but is to think about other family members. So a backup record that we could look for is something like that, like a spouse's obituary, a spouse's grave marker may say something about George's death date and place. All right. So we need to think about what records will answer my question. And if this is the first time that we're meeting this objective, so let's take his marriage date and place, for example. Okay. So you guys were great. You said a death certificate. So that could be one of the things that I'm going to look for. That's the first thing I'm going to look for, is his death certificate. And I'm going to keep some other ones in mind that I would encourage you to write down, which is I would look for his obituary. The other thing I could look for is a death index. I could look for a will and probate. All right. You don't have to write too many of these down. I would just write one or two that you think about. But if you look for a death certificate and can't find it, then I would make a new one. It would be, I'm going to look for his obituary. I'm going to look for, and if I can't find his obituary, I'm going to look for the death index, and so forth. All right. And so we would do these with all of them. So George's marriage and date and place, I'm going to look for the marriage record, and I may look for a marriage index. His exact birth, it would be awesome to find a birth certificate, but I know that I don't know anything about Greece or how to read Greek. So instead, I'm going to look for his obituary, because that may have something about his birthplace, or his death date. Okay, whoops. Oh, good question, Lori. What's the difference between a record and an index? I'll just answer that right now. An index is a record, let's start with the record, is what's called a primary resource, or a primary record. And that is a record that was generated right after the actual event. So for instance, the death record is a record produced by the state that, we all know what a death record is, that's recorded right, or really close to when the event happened. And that record has a lot of information on it that's really useful. Now, as records are collected by the state will often then create an index of all of the death records in a collection. An index is really like an index to, a collection that's going on. So this would be a death index. So an index can be created by the state. It can be created by a historical society, anybody that's trying to basically gather multiple records and then create an index. And an index most of the time has just a little bit of information on it to help us know that we have about the people, but the actual record itself will have more information on it. And oftentimes, because of privacy laws, or because of, just basically privacy, indexes are more available to us than the actual records, or more, let me say, more easily accessible. So often you can find indexes online, but you can't find the actual record online. You have to contact the library or the state archives, or the health vital records office to get the actual death certificate. So often on Family Search or Ancestry.com, you can find indexes. And I'm glad you asked that question, because if we look at our goal of number 2, we need to prioritize what we're going to look for based on what we think is most available. And there's no rhyme or reason to this, in the sense that there's no right or wrong. But personally, as I've done more research, I know that it's probably easier for me to obtain a death index entry that will give me a little bit about his death more easily than his death certificate. So that's why I would put it at number 1. But again, there's no right or wrong to the order at which you're going to do your research. Does that make sense, Lori? Cool. All right. So here's my plan now. As you can see here, this is my plan of action. I'm going to find George D. Messagey in all the United States census records. And then after that, I'm going to try to look for his death date and place in Washington. And I'm first going to look for a death index, and then maybe a death certificate, and then so forth. Again, I would just maybe do 1 or 2 to think about. Same thing with the marriage, and same thing with his birthplace. Now I have a plan of action to where I'm going to go. The second part to this step is to get even more specific. And this is where the preliminary survey kind of idea comes in. Now, again, often, how much info do you need to search the census? You can just have a name for all it matters when you're searching a census, but the more information you know, the better. And if you're able to, Mary Sue, I think you're signed up for a second, Mary Sue, for my second webinar. If you are, that I'll go into a lot more detail on actually searching, actually doing the actual searches, but we can answer that question too at the end. But you don't really need that much information when you're searching for census records, because they're all online, and because they're very easily searched. But the more information you have, the easier it can be. Does that make sense, Mary Sue? Cool. Now, it's great to say I'm going to search a death index for George D. Messagey. Now that's awesome. If I'm thinking that in my head, it's like, yeah, I'm going to search for a death index. But do I even know that death indexes are available? Or do I even know that death certificates are available online during my time period? And so you need to find out, this is what's called a preliminary survey, what records are available to you in that location at that time period. Okay. So how we do this, and this is, I find a lot of people, is the eye-opener for them. And this is a really important step when creating your plan, because again, back to our original wagon train walking in, or just stepping in and saying, I want to know everything about John Smith. Ancestry.com and Family Search are very big places. It's a big world with a lot of records on it and a lot of indexes, and they're constantly adding to it. And so if you just go on to Ancestry.com or Family Search and you just use their front engine on their homepage and search, you'll get frustrated after a while. So I'm going to show you some tricks right now. Let's change the share here to Chrome here. Can you see that, Ancestry.com? Ken? Everybody? Okay. So here's the homepage to Ancestry.com, and here's the search engine I'm talking about. Instead of searching here, you come up to this search button up at the top and click on that and click on all collections. And this will give you keep scrolling down, a map of the United States or the world if you're searching in another country. And we are interested in looking for his death, and we're going to assume that he died in Washington. So I want to see what kinds of death records are available, or death resources, I should say. I want to know what death resources are available online for Washington. And let's scroll down. And here I have Washington marriage records, 1854, 2013, Washington death index, 1940 to 2014. It has on the right here, this tells me how many records are in that collection. And that's really exciting that they have this index, but remember, we think that he died, and he most likely did, or he'd be 90, so I guess there is a chance that he could be in this collection. But the likelihood is slim. And so we have Washington death index 1940 to 2014. So he's probably not going to appear in there. So I'm not going to look in that. Now, Washington select death certificates. I don't know what that select means. I guess it means they were non-objective. Were they subjective in choosing what death certificates went in this collection? 1907 to 1960. And he could appear in this for all we know. But that's why my census records objective is first, is I'm hoping it'll give me more clues about his death. But here's a collection that he may appear in. So I would put this on my, can you see my Word document? Or are you still looking at, you can see the Word document?
We're still looking at the website.
Okay, this is silly that you have to do this every time. Okay. Oh, what if I just did desktop? Hang on. Sorry, guys, this is, like I said, our first.
No, not desktop.
Oh, okay. All right, so this is death index, or I'm gonna search, my new objective here is this collection, all right? And so that would maybe be my first place that I would look. Now, if you went back to, oh, I have to do this every time. I didn't realize this would be such a, sorry, everybody. If we go back to ancestry.com, if this collection wasn't here, or this collection wasn't here, and you were just searching ancestry.com in the homepage, and you were looking for his death, and you were so confused you couldn't find his death, that's why. Because he died before 1940, and he doesn't appear in that index, nor does he appear in that death certificates. And so you're very frustrated that you can't find him, but that's the reason why, is they don't have anything else on Washington. It doesn't mean that he didn't die in Washington. It just means that ancestry.com doesn't have him in their collection. Does that make sense? If I can get a yes from people. Okay, cool. So you need to know what collections are available to you on these major sites that we look at. So let's look at family search, and I'll show you how to do the same process. If you go to family search and I come into records, and if you scroll down, you go to browse all published collections. Here's a list of all the databases within family search. That's a lot. It just goes on and on and on and on. Excuse me. So I want to narrow this down. It's still loading. Come on. And I want to only see what's available in Washington. So here's the death certificates, the same collection that we saw. And if we scroll down, we see they have some other resources. So they have Washington County deaths, 1891 to 1907, but they only have 3,500 entries within it. It's not a very big collection. I can still look there, but I have to keep in mind that it's not a very big collection. We also have, probate case files. There's some other, other probate things for Washington, some other resources. So I would come here and I would click on Washington death certificates to actually search when we get to the actual searching portion. This allows me to search just this collection without seeing everything else in the family search database. So I don't get lost, so I don't get confused. I'm focusing on just this one objective. Betsy, do you have a question? Go ahead and type that in. I'm going to go back to the screen for our objectives here. Oh, no question. Okay. Come on, thing. So this is when I'm creating an objective, my now new objective is not just search death index, it's search the Washington Select Death Certificates 1907 to 1960. Some other places to learn about what's available is a book called Ancestry's Handy Book. I'll put that in the chat so you can see that, Ancestry's Handy Book. And what this is for the United States. It goes through each state and it breaks it down into census record, vital records, probates, and it will tell you about those records and what's available to you. So if, let's say you're looking in Alabama and during the Civil War, after the Civil War, a lot of records were burned. And so it will tell you certain counties that have burned counties, meaning that they don't have any records, things like that. So it's really handy. That's why it's called the handy book, right? To have this book, you can pick it up at a library. Another website that's really helpful is called Family Search Wiki. And we'll go back to our internet browser. And over here under Family Search, under search it says Wiki. So if you click on that, this is like Wikipedia for genealogists. And if you want to know anything about what records or resources are available to you in a specific place, this is a great place to go. Or if you just want to learn about how to do family history in Norway, you could come in here and type in Norway and see what resources are available in Norway. I was helping a client who was looking for an individual who we knew was a prisoner in the Nebraska State Penitentiary at one time. And I was like, how do I find records on Nebraska State Penitentiary? And I Googled and I couldn't find anything. So I typed it into Family Search Wiki, Nebraska prison records. And it brought up a wiki article that had a link to an index of penitentiary records. And I was able to find him in that index and then contact the Nebraska Historical Society to get the actual records. So it's a great place. So we could come here and we could type in, Oregon. I'll give an example. And Oregon State Genealogy, come down here and, oh, my windows are blocking. Over here on the right, it says record types. So if we want to know about Oregon vital records are birth, marriage, and death. And we scroll down, this little chart will tell us Oregon vital records start the following years. The earliest was 1871. Statewide registration didn't start until 1903. That means the state took over registering everybody's births. Marriages were taken over by the state in 1906 and deaths in 1903. Okay, and then down here, these gives me some resources about Oregon birth, marriage, and death records online. This tells me that Oregon State Archives has a historical records index. Family Search has the Oregon marriage records, 1849 to 1952. Family Search also has Oregon births and christenings, 1868 to 1929, and so forth. And then it gets more specific. We can learn about adoption and stuff like divorce, things like that. So this is a great resource to learn about what's available to you in your area of research. And it's really important to take do this step, because otherwise you're just searching aimlessly. And when you're searching online, you often don't know, you get confused, but it's just because it's not online and you don't know that it's not there. So I encourage you to take the step when you are creating. This is the plan part. This is the planning step that if you don't take, that your goals will become frustrating to you. All right. So back to our goals on our document. I am going to just, I'd plug in what these indexes are things that I'm going to learn for. I'd make a little list, plan of action, which one am I going to start with? And I would just write it down on there. Any questions right now about this process? Just throw in a question mark if you have any questions. Just say no, or you're good, makes sense, you're cool, you're awesome, whatever you want to say. You're good, you're goose. Okay, wonderful. I love this process. Oh, thank you, Nan. I do a little up there. Like I said, this process of creating our plan is really important to staying on track. And again, back to writing down our objectives, you need to write these resources that you're going to look at down, connected to your goals. So here's my goal. Here are the resources I'm going to look at. Very important to write these down so that you know that I check these off, I'm here. So let's talk about the next step is the actual research. So we've written down the resources that we want. Now we're ready to research. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this step because that's for other webinars, but just a few points that I want to make under this step. And we'll talk a lot more about some tips with researching, especially in the next webinar. Keep your objectives and your plan nearby, always. So if you have double monitors, that's my preference. Again, if you're just going to write it down, wherever it is that you keep track, always keep it out in front of you when you do your research. Be prepared to tweak your plan as you go. So for instance, we'll look on the Washington Select death certificates. We don't find anything. What's the next thing I'm going to do? What's the next thing I'm going to do when we find new information? Be prepared to tweak it. Have some whiteout if you're going to use paper. But again, we'll talk about some tools to make this process easier. Keep track of your analysis and your to-dos. As you are doing research, you will come across other relevant information about either other family members or about the person you're researching, and you need a place, one location to record those to-dos. It won't work to put it on a napkin. Of course, it won't work to put it on the palm of your hand. And you need to have it in a place that you can always come back to, that you know is in that one spot. Record your analysis and your to-dos and do it as you go. It's very easy to just get excited and keep doing research again. But if you're keeping track of these information as you go, you will not get lost. You may still be confused, right? Because it is family history and there are confusing moments, but you won't get lost. All right, so the next step is to, after we've done our research, is to update and record. Update our plan, record what we found. When you need to, we talked about recording your analysis and your to-dos, but you also need to record your results. Your successful results, so perhaps it's find his death date and place. We look in one resource, we find it, yay, we do the happy genealogy dance, which I think all libraries need a genealogy, happy dance place where we can go and be like, yeah, found it. But if you're just doing this in your office, make any hoop-de-la noise you want. So you find, you get successful, you record what you found, you add it to your tree, but you also want to record what you didn't find. Meaning, if I look at that Washington Select death certificates and I don't find George in it, I need to record that he wasn't in that collection. Why do I want to do that? Does somebody know why? Why do I want to record what's called nil searches or unsuccessful searches? So you don't look there again. Good, Betsy. So you don't duplicate your efforts. Exactly. Our time is precious. And the last thing you want to do is spend time looking in the same place over and over and over again. So if you have a place where you record what you did, you know that you looked there and it wasn't there, or maybe you want to go back and just double check, but you won't duplicate your records. Very important. The other thing when you're recording is to keep track of your sources. The best way I can show you all of this is in a case study. So I'm going to show you this process, kind of going through the process of recording, writing down, and so forth. So back to our pedigree, we've written down what records we're going to look for. Here is our objectives. And I want to show you there's a question in the Q&A section. Is that relevant to us right now? Let me see. Oh, Betsy, you said, does Family Search require a subscription? No, it does not. It's free. And my third webinar coming up in June will talk about how to use Family Search and the difference between Family Search and Ancestry.com. So now let's go to my PowerPoint. Yeah. So here is all the census records for George Demosthenes in a little spreadsheet that I created. And goes through all the years. The census records, of course, have more information that's here, but here I find that he lives until the 1910 or up to the 1910 US Census. I can't find him after 1910. So I'm going to assume that he died sometime between 1910 and 1920. So if I go back to my, back to my objective list, I can check off this objective. I met it, woohoo, I found all of them in the census records. That objective, that goal is finished. Cross it off, happy dance. Now we're ready to move on to the next one. And from the census records, I learned something new. I now learned that he died between 1910 and 1920. This is updating my plan or my objective based on what I found before. And this is why it's so important to record what I found. I'm also now going to guess that he died in Washington because he appeared in 1910 in Washington State. So we have more specifics because of what I found. So remember that objective lens, information, look through the glass, found new information to help me out. So we search for the Washington death certificates. Let's say we decide to look at the Washington Select death certificates, 1907, 1960, and we don't find him there. That now becomes a nil search. He's no longer in there. And I'm ready to look for someplace else. If I have a plan on where to look next, another resource, I would move to that resource. If I don't, then I would spend some time figuring out a new resource to look at, such as using Google. I have used Google to just type in Washington death records and to look there. And so I have nil. I don't find anything in that collection. So let's pretend that I'm really stuck. I can't find him anywhere in this collection and any collections, and I'm getting really frustrated. So I decide I'm going to move to the next objective. I'm going to put his death date on hold and come back to it. And this is why, again, it's so important to write out your goals. Is now I know that that's an incomplete goal that I can come back to, and I know what I've looked at. So if I come back to it a month later, 2 years later, whenever it is, I can be like, okay, this is where I left off. These are the resources I looked at. This is where I left off. So important. So we move on to, well, actually, let's we're going to say that's where we left off. But let's say that, oh, sorry, I'm not paying attention to my notes, but that's no big deal. So 1 step 2 here is we could, let's say we come back to this 2 years later, right? And we're ready to try again. And one thing we could do is go back to what we know. We're coming back to this objective. What do I know? Well, I know that Catherine died in 1947. And I know the exact place and the exact date. So I'm going to look for her obituary, because her obituary may tell me when he died. So that's a new objective within this one is, this is looking so weird. Find Catherine. Sorry, why is this so small? It's because of, okay, that didn't do much. Sorry, guys. Oh, the view size. I could do that. Okay. Yeah. So Catherine Messages obituary. That's a new objective within this main goal. So I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint because lo and behold, I have her obituary there. So you don't have to do the actual research. Here's her obituary. And it says, Miss Catherine Messagey was born in Brooklyn, New York. And she was married to the late George D. Messagey in Seattle in 1878 and moved here with him in 1884. Mr. Messagey died in Olympia in 1911. Her obituary now tells us where he died, 1911. I can now update my pedigree, to, I guess I don't have it on there, to 1911. And now I know that he died in Olympia. That's new information for me to help me find even more about him. We can then contact, but before we do that, what is some new information in this obituary that actually helps us with other objectives? Does anybody see some information that I just read that helps us with other objectives? Marriage date. That's right. Okay, awesome. So now we know that they were married in Seattle. Okay, I wouldn't even have thought of Seattle otherwise. I would then go back to my objective and I would tweak it to say, search for their marriage record in 1878 in Seattle. And I record that as I go because I'm still focused on George Messagey's death date. I'm not going to get sidetracked by this new information about the marriage because I'm not ready to go to that goal yet. I'm still focused on his death. So I'm going to jot down that I found out that, Seattle in 1878, but I'm going to stick to the death because that's my first objective. This helps us stay track. Finding that marriage there is secondary to this first one that I'm working on. Okay. So here I contact the Vital Records Office now that I have an actual death date, year, and I'm able to find his death record. And I find out a couple things more. So not only do I find out that he died December 28th, 1911, but I also find out that he was born in, I don't know how to pronounce this, but I get the actual city. It's an island in Greece. I also find out that he was buried in the Masonic cemetery. This is new information, and I don't want to get sidetracked, so I'm going to write it down on my objective list as a to-do. And I'm going to come back to my Word document. And my new to-do is to find George D. Messagey's obituary because I'm interested now that I have an actual date, and find George D. Messagey's grave site. And I'm going to be a bit more specific. In Olympia, Washington, Masonic Cemetery. And here I'm going to get more specific. Look for his obituary around the 28th of December, 1911 in Olympia, Washington. These are to-dos. because I want to keep focusing on my plan. I want to come back to these to-dos later. And I update his birth info, update my objectives. I was able to find his death. So I'm going to cross this off. I'm ready to move on to my next objective. Now, I am interested in finding their marriage, but let's say I want to focus on one of these to-dos. So I'm actually going to bring these to-dos up and make them part of my plan now. So this one becomes, my numbering system's all messed up, sorry. But this becomes the priority now through this process. And we'll go back to my PowerPoint here. How are we doing time? Okay. And here's his obituary, where we've confirmed that he was buried in the Masonic cemetery. And then I decided to search for his cemetery, which I found here. Here's a fun story. My husband's here because this is one of my favorite stories. I was trying to find this picture. I was trying to find this cemetery. I was going to the actual place and finding his gravesite. And I knew it was in the Masonic cemetery, but that's it. So my husband, my mom, and I go to try to find it. And my mom had been there one time before, but she couldn't remember where it was. And we pull into the parking lot, and the office to the cemetery is closed, of course. Nobody's there to help us find it. And I have like 15 minutes because we have to get to another appointment. And so my mom and I said, okay, let's just, we're like, let's say a prayer. So we say a prayer, and we're like, God, help us find this gravesite. We only have 15 minutes. Mom's been there before. Please lead us there. And we all take off and go our separate ways. We're like, let's break up. I mean, there's hills and hills and hills of grave markers at the cemetery. So my mom and I stop, and we're like, listen, okay, let's go this way. We feel like we should go this way. And so we start going, and then we're like, okay, I feel like I should go this way. Let's keep going. So we keep going, and we go further and further and further away. And then finally I'm like, where's Kenneth? Where is he? And we turn around, and he's back where we started, just off the sidewalk, pointing at the ground, and says, what was his name again? And he had found it. It was right off. My husband doesn't do a lick of family history. That's why he married me. He doesn't do any family history, and he found it just pointing at it going, what's his name again? Funniest thing that happened. It was such a fun story. I just had to share it because I have that memory with this picture. So there he is. We found the cemetery information there. So now we can cross off those to-dos off our list there. And now we're ready to go on to the next one. All right. So this is how we stay going on. We have a new update of that they were married in 1878 in Seattle. So we should have updated that before when we got that information. And I would look online to see what resources are available for marriage records in Seattle on Ancestry.com, on Family Search, what years are covered, is there anything available there? And let's say there's not. I can't find anything there. But because I have it recorded, I can move on to the next one, which is to find his exact birthplace, which I did in the death records. So I would update that here. And I'm going to actually tweak this to say, I want to now, because I found his actual place, I want to find his naturalization record. Okay, so that would be my new objective. And once I get to that one, I can say what resources online or at a library will help me answer that. And I do that search. That is that process. Does that make sense? Everybody following me here? Get any question marks? Any questions? Can I get a Yahoo? We're all still alive? Okay. These webinars, I enjoy meeting with you live and live because I can hear you versus this. Awesome. Okay. The last thing when we're recording is it's so important to record where we got our information. Sourcing. Information without sources is myth. There's nothing worse than looking at somebody else's family tree or some other information and not know where somebody got that information. So sourcing where we got our information helps us eliminate duplicate research. Yeah, so frustrating. And it helps us track what we did and help others to track what we've done. If you have any intention of publishing your work on the internet or in book form and writing form, you need to have sources. And there's kind of, what you need to think about is who, what, where, when, and how. So when you have a certain document that you have found to confirm some information, you need to record who generated that document. Was it the county? Was it a person that you got it from? So, what is it? Who created that resource? What is it? Where was it published? When? And how did you access it? So you can say just death certificate. I got this from a death certificate, but that's not good enough. Where did you get that? What was on it? And how did you access it? What collection? Was it on the select death certificates, or was it on a totally different database? There are resources to help with this process. Most family tree software programs, such as Roots Magic, Ancestry.com online, or if you have a tree on Family Search, allows you to add source information. Now, something like if you have your tree, let me just ask this, where do you keep your tree of information about your family? Do you keep it on Ancestry, Family Search, on a different database, in a notebook, Ancestral Quest? Okay, good. Anybody else? Where do you keep your tree? Nowhere. Maybe that's what you need to know. Ancestry, Judith. Okay. On a piece of paper. Okay. Family Search. People keep changing it. Yes. Family Search, Ancestry.com. Okay. The most common ones are those. So Mary Sue, I could do a whole organizing workshop where I encourage you, if you can, to do a digital family tree. And if you want to talk more about that, you can email me, and I can give you some different resources for places to do that, because it makes updating your tree much easier than just on a piece of paper. Family Search, Nan, yeah, because everybody's working on it together, they keep changing it. And so that's why we kind of work together. Ancestry. Okay, good. So, and I try to encourage you to keep it in at least just one or two places. And my point here is that places like Family Search and Ancestry have the ability to just help you write sources down. So it will kind of prompt you with fields on how to write it down. Software such as Roots Magic or Ancestral Quest or Legacy, these are software programs that you have on your computer, and you download them to your computer, and they have more specific source templates where they actually they give you a template to write down the sources, and you just type it in and it generates a source for you. But there are a couple other books though that can help you with sourcing. And sorry, the cat is scratching at the door, if you can hear that. She's like, let me in. Okay. I can hear one, two. Okay. So I'm going to skip this because we're running out of time. So here's some sourcing information. So Elizabeth Shown Mills is like she wrote the Bible of how to source for family history. And she wrote a book called Evidence, Citation Analysis for Family Historian. And it's a great resource. It's about this thin, but then she realized it wasn't enough. So she wrote Evidence Explained, and it's like this big. And it's a good doorstop note. If you wanted to know how to source any possible record you could think of with family history, it's in Evidence Explained. And but I really encourage you, again, if you're using Family Search or Ancestry, it gives you source templates that are good enough. But if you want to be more professional about it, you may look into these resources. All right, last points I want to make is this whole process that we just went through, creating objectives, creating a plan, what records and what resources are going to help me answer this question. And all the tweaking that you do to your plan, all of that is best put together in what's called a research log. A research log is just what it's the title of it, a log of your research. It puts all of this information that we just talked about into one spot. You're able to track what you've looked at, track what you found, track what you didn't find, organize your sources, eliminate duplicate research, and help you focus on your research all in one place. So remember I talked about having your objectives next to you on your computer? That's having your research log next to you. Can you just let her in? The cat in. One way, there are different ways to do a research log. And I don't really care how you do a research log, as long as you have one. And but I'll talk about I'm going to talk about briefly different different ones to do. You can do paper. So here's an example of a research log. You could have a blank piece of paper, but as you saw with even using Word document, it gets very cumbersome, or it gets, if you're not, what's the word I'm looking for? It gets all mishmatched and everything like that. But here you can see that with this research log, you'd have to have a lot of pieces of paper for every person that you've ever researched and every objective that you're ever interested in. That process using on a piece of paper would fill your office, right? From all the pieces of paper that you have. And I've done this before, and then it doesn't become useful to you because you're like, where is that last objective? I'm looking all over for it. Where did I last leave off? Okay, you can use paper if you want. Just keep it in a notebook at least, but it's not my favorite thing to use with a research log. You can use Word if you're more systematic about it and you're very conscious about putting it in and how you record it. You can use something like Excel. Now, this was a research log that I used in the past when I was in college. So here on the left, I have who I was searching for, what was searched, and then results and my notes and analysis. I then also was able to attach the actual records that I found that were on my computer to the notes. But again, this got very cumbersome because I wasn't very consistent with my terms. And so here you can see, I searched Frazier, Kentucky death records, 0 matches, 1 match, some possible. And this just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And to know exactly where it went off. And also notice it's not centered on any real good objectives. The other thing you can use is Evernote. If you've ever used Evernote, it is a great resource. It's free, and it's technology software that you can have on your computer and on your phone and in the cloud. And it's like a notebook, or a way to have multiple notebooks. And basically to have pieces of paper. It's what I say about it is it's a way to have a bunch of your notes on pieces of paper, but be able to search those pieces of paper and pull up the exact piece of paper that you want, if that makes sense. So the blank pieces of paper on Evernote allow you to, it's just a blank page that you can type and write things out. But again, it doesn't give you any sort of structure with this. And so it can get kind of confusing. You can attach pictures and everything like that. There are a lot of videos on YouTube. If you were to go to YouTube and type in Evernote for genealogists, and you'll find lots of videos on how to use Evernote to keep track of your notes and your research. So if that's of interest to you, Evernote's free. Use YouTube to learn more about it, about how to create it. Now, my personal favorite research log software program is called Research Ties. And a professor of mine at BYU created this program. And I'm not, this isn't sponsored or anything. This is just a tool that I love and use. It has a little bit of a learning curve, but if you're really serious about doing family history, all the steps that I just went over to creating your plan are within Research Ties. It's a research log created by a genealogist for genealogists. And I want to show you just briefly the potential that it can help you with. So I'm going to come up here. Got a few more minutes. Come on. There we go. Okay. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Sorry. Now you're seeing not what I want you to see. Research Ties is not a software program that you download. It's in the cloud. That way you can always access it at any time, at any place. You can walk into a library, you can walk into the Family History Center, wherever. You can be at grandma's house and you want to look up your research, you can access it anywhere because it's online. It's $30 a year. So it's really affordable. And it allows you can have up to 3 research logs, but because of its searching capability, you only really need 1. I have multiple here because I do client research. And I'm going to show you basically the process that we went through on here. So you want to add an objective. And here are the 4 objectives that I talked about, the categories. So let's say I'm looking for identify the father of, and here is a list of all the people that I have put into this program. You can upload a tree, a GEDCOM, you can enter in these names by hand, whatever it is, but once they're in the database, they're always in the database. I don't have to retype them. So identify the father of Charles A. Blake. That's my objective. That's my goal. And you can add some additional details, but I'm going to save that objective. And I can create another objective. So remember at the beginning, I created a list of objectives. So I could just create a bunch of objectives. Or I can now do step 2, add what's called a search to this objective. So I'm going to search, in order to find the father of Charles Blake, I'm going to search, and again, this is a list of all the resources that I have inputted into this program. If I've looked at it in the past for another objective, it's already in here. I don't have to re-put it in. If it's a new resource that I've never looked at, I would just click on here and I would add that. But let's say I'm going to look in the 1880 census. It's in here. And where in the 1880 census? I'm going to look in Seattle, King County, Washington. The scope, that's for another day to really teach those, but that's kind of who I'm looking for again. The record type, I'm looking for census. Any comments I want to add, and I save my search. I can then create another search attached to that objective. So remember at our list, I had search for George Message's death, and I was looking at the select death certificates. I wanted to look at another death index that I found. I wanted to look at whatever it is, maybe it's something on microfilm. I create a list of these searches, and all of these searches, if they have no results to them, are to-dos now. They're in the database, always acting as a to-do. So then let's say I'm ready to search that particular, the 1880 census. Here's my objective, here's my search. What did I find? And it has some things filled in here, the date I looked for, who I found. I found Charles Blake. His name was listed as Charles Black or Blake or whatever I found. The citation details, so here's the sourcing, the sources. So actual enumeration district, what the census page number, whatever the specifics I need for that. I can put in my analysis about, what I found, anything I want to remember about this particular census. And then I can add the actual record to this result. So I can do that either through a link. Here is the census record on ancestry.com. I put in the hyperlink to it on the website. So I come over here, I Go away, little thing. Okay, and then I put it here, or I could attach a file to what I found on my computer, and it's automatically put attached to the result. I can then add another result because when I'm looking for Charles, I found his wife. Come on, thing. There it is. So while I was looking, I found Margaret Cook. And here's the same citation detail. Here's her image. And I can add all the children that I found in the census, and it's all connected. Does this make sense, this process with this software program? I'm going a little more detail on this just to kind of give you, if you want to play around with it, but to remind you of this process. After you've done all that, you can come up here, and I'm going to go to my client log to show you. After you've inputted all this information, you can search your log. And this allows you to search for anything that you've ever done. So if I come up here, and if I don't type in anything into the search engine, I just hit search, I will see a list of all the goals that I ever have inputted into this database. So here's search the death information for James William Owen. He died 1st of January 2001, but he died in Iowa. But did he die in Iowa? His last residence, according to Social Security, is in Iowa City. I can click on this, and these are my goals, my searches, U.S. Social Security Death Index. And here it is. I found him in his Social Security. So that's a completed result. Search by biographical information. Here's everything that I've ever searched for William F. Douglas in one spot. If there's nothing there, that means it's a to-do. Here's the deeds, didn't find anything, and so forth. I can come back to the search engine, and I can narrow this down. I can say, show me everything, all my results for James William Owen, and I can narrow it down. I can say, show me only just the census records that I have for him, or show me only the things that I have for him in Oregon, and it will generate just anything I have just for him. It's really snazzy, along with the image that I have attached to it right there. So it's all in one place, in one thing. That's Research Ties as a research log. It's a tool. You can decide if you want to use it or not, but I just want to show you because it's so powerful, so helpful when tracking your research. So let's go back to my PowerPoint just in closing here to end, and then we can answer questions. Where's my PowerPoint? Let's go back to our step-by-step. Step one is we create our objectives. What are our goals? We want to be specific, and we want to include date and place. We want to create a plan of action, which it means what resources am I going to look at to answer my question. We then do the actual research, and then we record and update that information as we go. So if you remember one important thing, it's to keep track of what you're looking at on a piece of paper or in a research log. All right. And if you do that, you will feel much better. You will feel like this. This is my son, William. I can't remember. I think he was like 5 months old, 4 months old, 5 months old.
So.
And you will feel like this as you do your family history rather than the frustrated child there. I hope that you feel more, have some tools to help you feel more in control. I will send you a handout tomorrow of this weekend of my notes for you to have looked at in this process to remember it by. And so please email me if you have any questions after we're done here that come up. I love getting to know you and I love staying in touch. So as you go through this process and you're like, Hannah, I'm really confused, or this is my objective, do you think this is good enough, or do you have any ideas of where to go, please email me. I'm very happy to help. I'm here for you as a resource. So if you need to go, feel free to go. If you have any questions, I want to answer some questions we had from the beginning. But if you have any questions, stick around. Let me know if this was thumbs up, if this worked. If you have any questions, stick around and we will answer that. Thank you, Nana. You're so welcome. I'm so glad that was helpful to you. Thanks, Lori. Usually with people, I go around and talk to them. And if you want to come to my other webinars, they're still up for there, and we'll have lots more topics coming. What were our 2 questions at the beginning?
Just to Google up, if you want to read them to you.
Please do.
How to access newspaper archives.
Newspaper archives. Where are other webinars posted? I'll answer that real fast. The other webinars are on Eventbrite. So where you registered for this one, Ken, what's the best way to get there?
I'll text them. I'll put a link in the chat.
We will put it. Ken's going to put a link in the chat box. I can send that out in an email too as well. Oh, you wish I was doing that order? Saying no, Laura, you want me to do it like every week? I hear William crying out there. My son, my 8-month-old. So my husband will post the link to the other webinars in here. So every day, Lori, you just need to come over, right? So newspaper archives. My favorite place to look for online newspapers is on, Ken, if you just leave the, where's the questions? You just want to leave them here and go check on William for me. My favorite place is called Genealogy Bank, genealogybank.com or .org. Genealogy Bank. You do have to pay for it, but it has tons of newspapers online and a lot of historical ones. I love Genealogy Bank. Another great one that I've had success with is newspapers.com. It was purchased by Ancestry, so newspapers.com. And I will actually talk a lot about newspapers in my next webinar and how to search for them. A lot of libraries have access to newspaper archives, and some universities even create their own newspaper archives and online. But if you don't find anything on Genealogy Bank or on newspapers.com, my suggestion is to contact the local the state historical society. They know about the resources in that area, and they may even have some newspapers on microfilm or whatever it is. So it's I would just contact a historical society, say, I'm looking for this person at this date, I'm looking for an obituary, or I'm looking for this newspaper, can you help me out? And they will point you in the right direction. Nan, the newspaper archives, either look online or contact the historical society. Does that help, Nan? Hopefully that helps you out. Yeah, perfect. Okay, and email me if you have any issues with that. And then Judith asked, looking for Benjamin Robinson's birth records and when he came to Oregon, which wagon train? Okay, there's a great website called, I think it's called Oregon Pioneers. Let's see, let's go to, come on. I think it's OregonPioneers.org. No. What's the website called? I can't remember what it's called. Judith, if you email me, I can look for that. Maybe it's this one. Oh, this is it. Okay, it's called OregonPioneers.com, Wagon Train Research. Oops. Come on. Oregon pioneers. Okay, if you scroll, oh, where is it? There's a way on this site. You can search wagon trains and search, people keep adding names to the wagon train. It's on this site. But Judith, you're the one who asked this question. You can play around with this site, but I know it's on here. But I don't know where you live, Judith. Are you in Oregon or Washington, Judith? Or in Portland or anything? You live in Tigard. Cool. Then I would go to the Oregon Historical Society because we have a biography. Have you been there? Have you been there yet? I don't know if you came to one of my workshops at the Oregon Historical Society and if you went up to the library. Okay. Yeah. So if you go to the library, there's a biography index there, and that's really great for Oregon pioneers. We also have an Oregon Trail index to journals, and sometimes people will show up in there. But it all depends on what information you already have. Birth records in early 19th century, early 19th century are very tricky. They're not really that, there's not a lot of birth records. There may be some birth indexes, but you're probably going to have to use other resources such as an obituary for him or a death record for him or some other resource to find out when he was born, if that's what you're trying to figure out. But birth records in early 19th century, depending on where he was born, do you know where he was born? Can be tricky. The East Coast, they're a little more prevalent because of the colony times, but as you know, the statehood and so many different states took place, they become more west you go, the more less likely you are to find them. He was born in New York. Okay, so there is a good chance, and also at that time period, a lot of church records are more where birth information is at. And in my third webinar in June, we'll talk about Family Search. But if you go to Family Search, you can find sometimes church records on Family Search databases or at the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. You might be able to find church records for that particular county, but you're going to have to go to the county level to find birth information. Does that help? A few things, a little. If you want to email me, we can talk more about it, but we can go there. You also asked how to obtain copies not certified of marriage, death, and birth certificates from the Oregon archives. Yeah, so it all depends on when. Prior to 1903, as we learned, the counties were in charge of the birth, marriage, and death information. So you need to know what county they lived in and then contact the county archives. Now, the Oregon State Archives does have some county records within it. So just call or email the Oregon Archives, the Oregon State Archives in Salem. They're super helpful there. So I would just contact them. Any other questions from anybody? No? All right, if you just put a question mark if you have any questions. Otherwise, I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming and participating. I hope to see you at another webinar. And again, just email me if you have any questions. I'm happy to help with helping you create your plan or any other questions that you may have. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.